This is from the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net.
This is Sunday, October 12, 2014. See if you can catch the sophistry of the Young Turk program in what I will show you here, the news having to do with the Islamic State across the border from Turkey.
Oh boy, ISIS on the march again. This time they're near the Turkish border. Okay, now they haven't crossed that border. They're trying to capture a Kurdish town at the edge of the Turkish-Syrian border. It's called Kobani. The Arabs have a different name for it. I think it's Ain al-Arab. And over 400 people have already died. It's interesting. The U.S. is doing bombings to make sure they don't capture the town, but it's not working. Now, they haven't captured the whole town yet, and they captured apparently the southwestern end of the town, and then they hung some ISIS flags, you know, the black and white flags that you've seen, right, that you see in the picture here. And so the U.S. bombed that building. I don't know if it was literally a false flag operation where that they put the flags on a different building, but if it was their building that they put the flag on, not a good idea. Okay. Nonetheless, we haven't been able to stop them. Now, Turkey is saying, we see you, because they literally see them. This is like a Sarah Palin moment. From their porch in Turkey, they can see the ISIS flags flying. Now, Turkey's second largest army in NATO, you probably don't want to cross that border, okay? But so far they haven't. So Turkey's saying, look, we're beseeching the U.S. to get more involved. You want us to get more involved, and our parliament just voted to say, yes, we will get more involved, but you got to show up here. You want our boots on the ground. Where's your boots on the ground? Okay? It's a fair question. Now, being an American, I don't want our boots on the ground. So that's the conundrum that we're in.
It's hard for me to understand the lack of openness for what's happening with Islam and its foundation, while supporting a liberal, passive view to what Islam is doing and not really reporting on it. Look at what is going on, in fact.
As Kurdish fighters continue to battle ISIL in the Syrian town of Kobani, both Kurdish leaders and the UN have warned of an imminent bloodbath at the hands of extremists. Turkey has troops and tanks lined up along the border within a few hundred yards of the fighting, but has so far refused to intervene, demanding a buffer zone be set up in Syria before they get involved. The US has refused, and critics say the buffer zone would be used as an excuse for Turkey to crush the Kurds in the region. There's anger among Turkish Kurds who are being blocked from crossing into Syria to fight ISIL. If Turkey stays silent, it will be much worse. We know this. The fate of Kobani has led to violent street protests, which have left at least 37 dead. The Turkish president has dismissed the demonstrations and says the country won't change its foreign policy based on protests. Both those idiots and the leaders who hold their strings in their hands should be aware that Turkey is not a country to be intimidated by street protests and won't change direction.
Did you know that in 1974, Turkey invaded the European island of Cyprus, and its troops are still there holding 3% of the island? Did you know that since 2012, Turkey has been exploring and drilling for oil and gas in the waters and land of the European Union, and nobody does anything about it? The United States got involved with Turkey because they were willing to put missiles and nuclear weapons against Russia when the United States and Russia were in conflict. That was before the downfall of communism. I'm in Russia as you speak, and all the evil of people being murdered by the American-supported Islamo-fascists in Ukraine. It's a crime. That's a whole nother issue, and I hope to address that. But let's get on with this Islamo-fascist now.
In Düsseldorf in Germany, thousands of people gathered to demand more support for the Kurds in Syria and Iraq and for pressure to be put on Turkey to help.
Just a little background here. The Kurdish people were Persian. That would be what we presently call Iranian. And before Muslim conquests, they were Christian and Zoroastrian. When they were forced to convert to Islam or be killed, many were beheaded, they were inducted by the Muslim Turkmen as soldiers and fought against the Christian state of the Byzantine Empire that spoke Armenian and Greek. They killed the Armenians and Greeks, and to the point that the native language is not spoken anymore in the land of the seven churches. That's the land of the seven churches in the Christian Bible. It's no longer Christian. And in 2007, 3 young men were violently murdered with their throats slit in 2007. And last year, Erdogan let their 5 murderers caught at the scene slitting the throats of these 3 young men for breaking Bibles. He let them go home. Now, the young Turks don't talk about these things. And look at some of the violence that happened in Turkey. Today and last year, when there was a protest because Erdogan wanted to build a shopping mall in one of their main parks. Just look at this.
A bystander recorded video that shows what appears to be either pro-government supporters or off-duty authorities chasing a group of people through the streets of Turkey with machetes and other weapons late Saturday night, hitting and abusing members of the public at random. As official authorities arrive, we see a verbal exchange with the aggressors directing the officers where to go, followed by a continued attack on bystanders as police sit by.
Now, back to the problem at hand.
The UN envoy to Syria.
To the Turkish authorities, in order to allow the flow of volunteers, at least, and their own equipment, in order to be able to enter the city and contribute to a self-defense operation.
Turkey has so far refused to allow Turkish Kurds to cross the border to help defend the town. Tanks have been lined up along the frontier overlooking Kobani, but Ankara is reluctant to intervene. Around 700 mainly elderly people remain trapped in the centre, with 10 to 13,000 taking refuge nearby. The fate of Kobani has led to violent street protests which have left at least 31 dead. The Turkish president refused to be moved by the demos, saying Turkey is not a country which would determine its policy based on the violent act of terrorists and riffraff. The violence across the border risks stirring up ethnic tensions and destroying a peace process with the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, which has waged a 30-year insurgency against the Turkish government.
Now watch the Turkish police repeatedly beat and kick a woman protester.
Now, how are these guys sustaining themselves? Well, it turns out that they have many different ways of making money. Now, some of this we already know. You know that they've captured some oil fields and they make money by selling the oil. But now you wonder, who buys oil from ISIS? Well, it turns out that when you read further into it, and CNN actually had a very good article on this, it turns out the answer is almost everybody. Why? For example, in Turkey, a gallon of gas is $7.50. So when somebody comes down the street and says, "I'll give it to you for $5," they buy it. Okay, they don't ask any questions. Now, I'm overgeneralizing and simplifying a little bit, but that is in essence what's happening here, right? And so that's one way of making money. We also know that they've got some rich financiers in the Middle East who believe in Wahhabism and radical fundamentalist Islam, so they send them millions of dollars. But now that's what al-Qaeda, et cetera, are dependent on. But these guys, since they control land and territory, are not strictly reliant on that. That's why they're actually richer than al-Qaeda or any other terrorist group that's come up before. The oil makes them about $1 to $2 million a day, okay? But even if you're on the lower end of that, as some people suspect, a little over $1 million. But they also have wheat and other farmland and products, and sometimes they just smuggle those, sell those. But what they do in general, and this is fascinating, is that they tax the local population. So no matter what you're doing, tax. You want to go over the bridge? Tax. You want to go grow wheat on your land? Tax. Okay. If you're going to withdraw money from your bank account, ISIS is going to take a piece of it. You want to complain about it? Nah, I didn't think so, right? And they have an extortion racket, and a lot of these guys were former Saddam, some were generals, but obviously a lot of them were just former military under Saddam. And they don't really care ISIS, Islam, Saddam was secular. They don't care about that at all. They're just like, where's the money, Lebowski? So they became this enormous organized crime racket in Iraq. Now that they're in parts of Iraq and Syria and they control the ground, they have no one to oppose them. It's not like the cops can come in and say, hey, cut that extortion out, or a kidnapping racket. In Syria, they just kidnapped 20 Christians.
Don't let this man fool you. He knows they are true Muslims following the holy book, and they get rewarded in this life or in the next life if they die fighting for Allah to set up a worldwide caliphate, the Islamic State. That's why from America, from Europe, from Pakistan, from here in Russia, the Muslims, the young people that read the Quran, they're flooding there, not because they're criminals. They are stopped drinking. The women cannot be involved in monkey business on the street. Look at me, look at me. No abortion. They have to live by Allah's rules, which make a safe place for children, believe it or not. And they don't allow all the alcohol and sex and what you can hear what they say. Yes, the men are respected and they have control over the women, and if the women don't behave, they're in trouble. But there's a lot of women respect that too. Look at how many are going over to join ISIL from all over the world, young men and young women. And don't believe it when you hear the British mothers say, oh, I couldn't understand why that happened, because they're taught to deceive. The mothers and fathers deceive you. They are rewarded for their children going over there. But to tell the infidel that would be trouble. And if their children get killed, that's an honor. Don't you understand that? Just like there in Gaza, that they would put their tunnels, start them underneath schools and stuff, that set up things so that their children might be sacrificed. They call it putting up a civilian shield or something. But in Islam, just like if your child is a suicide bomber, that's an honor for you. You need to understand that. These people are very dedicated to bringing a different world without all the evil in it. And when you look at Western society and the abortion rate and the crime rate and the lack of care for children, that their homosexuality is flourishing like a majority, along with the women's liberation who don't want to be good mothers anymore. Look at what's going on. And don't believe this who's just trying to pacify you that you're liberal or they're only criminals.
And so they hold them for ransom. Some people don't pay the ransom, and then we see what happens in the videos. And some people do pay the ransom. They pay handsomely. So they've got all these different revenue streams. But CNN talks about it like it's almost like a tech company. They're like, but on the other hand, they also have a significant burn rate. meaning that they're spending a lot of money on weapons, the economy, paying their soldiers. Those are real concerns that they have. But they have a renewable source of revenue in the people that in the areas that they control, because they're taxing the living hell out of them. Maybe in this case, quite literally, right? So until you get in there and uproot them from actually controlling that territory, they're going to continue to have that money. Now, those are all very inconvenient facts for us. I don't want ground troops. And, you know, there's a lot in there that I wish weren't the case, but it is the case. And you got to know your enemy before you can figure out how to beat him.
I have to laugh. Know your enemy. Read the Quran. The chapter number 2, or surah number 2, is the surah of abrogation. That Muhammad had a revelation that whatever he said later was what counted, that Allah could improve. And one of the last things he gave to the prophet were what really counted. And so the earlier ones don't count. But then the order of them were mixed up. So there's nice surahs that at first he thought Christians and Jews were going to accept him as the latest and greatest prophet. Jesus wasn't the Christ. He was just another prophet, and Muhammad was a greater one. And the surahs at first thought the Christians and Jews would accept him as a prophet and follow him. Then when they did, he had the surah of abrogation, and those nice things don't count, but you don't know what they are. You can find the Quran at the University of Michigan, which I downloaded, and you can find it in the order of precedence, so you know what surahs count, like Surah 8 and 9, where the unbelievers have to submit. The Christians and Jews just have to submit. The polytheists have to be converted or have their heads cut off. Christians and Jews did have special status, and the Jews served the Muslims for 700 years, running Spain over the Christians, but that's a whole nother thing. Now, I will end this by giving you a clip that shows you about the deception of Islam. Please look into these things.
Announcing Book 5 of the Crackpot Conspiracy Series, Islamic World Domination, Fact or Fiction, by Martin and Patricia Riot, is now available at Amazon. Is Islam really a religion of peace? Do you believe the war on terror is really over, as the Obama administration claims? Do you believe the ongoing jihadist attacks around the globe are peaceful? Did you know that the Quran, or Quran, the Holy Book of Islam, commands its followers to spread Islam by the sword? And Muslims have been doing just that for centuries. The Quran also instructs its followers to lie, that's known as taqiyya, or to lie by omission, known as kitman, in order to spread Islam. But one of the biggest lies is that Islam is a religion of peace. Instead, Islam is a religion of war, violence, and vengeance to be spread by the sword. The goal of Islam is that Allah's word and religion reign supreme. According to the Quran, the holy book of Muslims and Islam, Muslims are to pretend to be friendly to unbelievers until strong enough to overcome them. Then Muslims are to make war against unbelievers, that's non-Muslims, converting them by the sword. Also, according to the Quran, any people conquered by the sword must then convert to Islam, or submit to virtual slavery, or be killed. Some list of choices, huh? Make no mistake about it. The goal of Islam is Islamic world domination, and that's as instructed by their holy book, the Quran. Allah will only be satisfied when the entire world is Muslim. The teachings of the Quran, the basis of Sharia law, give no rights to women or children, and Islamic supremacists are pushing to have Sharia law in the USA. Islamic supremacists are working in the USA and around the globe to gain the power necessary to overthrow and dominate all infidels. And that would be us, folks. Islamic supremacists are using taqiyya, remember that's lying commanded by the Quran, to lull us into accepting Sharia law and eventual Muslim domination. Barack Hussein Obama is allowing infiltration into the highest levels of our government to these Islamic supremacists who have sworn to destroy us from within by our own hands. Obama is even allowing Islamic supremacists into sensitive positions of national security and national defense. We ask you again, do you believe Islam is a religion of peace? Do you believe the war on terror is over? Get your copy today of Islamic World Domination, Fact or Fiction by Martin and Patricia Riot, and discover the truth for yourself. Islamic World Domination, Fact or Fiction by Martin and Patricia Riot is now available at Amazon.com.